Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. Today I'm sharing 3 ways to add interest to die cuts. So I'm starting off with the wood cookie die set, and this is going to be my focal point of my card. So I'm taking the pieces that look like a wood slice. I would tend to call this a wood slice rather than a wood cookie, but actually I really love the term wood cookie. I'd never heard of that before. I am going to use the ladybug as well, but I'm going to save that for a little bit later. I then wanted some leaves to go alongside the wood slice, so I'm taking the Crafty Flower Open Peony layering die set. I thought these leaves were quite a nice shape and I thought that they would work quite nicely with the wood cookie. I'm going to cut those from some Green Meadows gradient cardstock, and I'm going to cut them from the lightest shade, which is Sweet Leaf. For the wood slice itself, I'm going to cut that from some scraps of brown cardstock. I could cut these from white cardstock because I am going to add ink blending over the top, but I thought it would just be easier and save me a little bit of time by cutting them from colours of cardstock, and then I don't have to do so much ink blending on top. So this is my first way to add interest to die cuts, and that's to add ink blending. It's a really quick and easy way to just add a little bit of interest onto die cuts. I do often like just cutting from colours of cardstock, and I do think that's really nice, but it does really add quite a lot of depth and interest by adding ink blending on top. So for the wood slice here, I'm using the Coffee Break Crisp Die Ink collection, and I'm just using the 3 lightest shades. And for this piece here, I really wanted the ink blending to be quite random so that there were some lighter areas and some darker areas. And then for this piece here that's going to go around the edge, I want this to be really quite dark. So I'm using the darkest shade, which is Espresso, and I'm coming in with a mini blending brush. And this is quite a dense brush, so it's going to add quite a lot of darkness of colour around the edges. And I'm just going around the outside edges so that the inside is just going to be just that tiny bit lighter than the outside edge. And again, I'm not being too precise with the ink blending. It's actually going to look better if I haven't got a really nice smooth blend. And you'll see that with this piece here, I'm really just being quite rough about it in a way, because I want it to look like it's rough, like wood actually is. So just adding that colour here with the small blending brush, and just going around all of the area here, and then I'm just going to lay all of the pieces on top of each other so that I can see if I need to add any more ink blending. So just popping that piece there on top, and then that's going to go on top of that, and I think that that's going to look quite nice. So I'm going to move on to the leaves here, and I'm using the Green Meadows Crisp Die Ink collection. This is the same shades of ink that I've cut the cardstock from. So I'm starting off with the second lightest shade. I'm not using the lightest shade because I didn't think it would really show up on these kind of leaves otherwise. So I'm starting off with what is my lightest shade, which is the Sweet Leaf. And I thought for these leaves, ordinarily I would probably go in and add ink blending kind of like maybe towards the bottom of the leaves, or maybe just on one side of the leaves. But for these ones, I thought it'd be quite nice for a change just to go quite random. So again, just having some areas be lighter and some areas be darker. And I think it worked out quite nicely for kind of like the look of the card that I'm going for. And again, I'm just using the mini ink blending brush here. And then I can finish off with that darkest shade. And as the ink dries, it does lighten up a little bit as well. So it's not going to end up as dark as it looks now on camera. And I'm just using the sticky mat here to hold them in place while I'm doing the ink blending. I'm then going to take the ladybug, and I'm going to cut that from some speciality cardstock, and this is the second way to add interest onto die cuts, and that's to use speciality cardstock. And I thought that I would cut the ladybug's wings from some glitter cardstock. This is the Pink Brilliance glitter cardstock set, and I'm taking 2 shades of that, one that's a little bit more red toned and one that's a little bit more on the pink side of things. Ladybugs generally are more on the red side rather than the pink side, but I wasn't sure at this point which one I thought might look the best. So I am going to cut two and have two ladybugs so that I can decide which one I want to use at the end. So I'm going to cut the body from some black cardstock, and then I'm going to cut the bottom of the wings from vellum translucent paper. So again, another speciality cardstock, and they all work quite nicely together. So this is the darkest shade of the glitter cardstock. In the end, I do use the lighter one, but I think this one looks really nice as well. So I'm definitely going to keep this ladybug so that I can use for another project. Here in the UK, we actually call ladybugs ladybirds. I'm not sure exactly why as such. I don't know whether like the phrase ladybug is probably more relevant to a ladybird, but either way, if I call it one or the other, I'm talking about the same thing. So I'm adding a little bit of liquid glue onto the back of the wing piece on the glitter cardstock, and then popping that onto the vellum piece. So I can just do the same thing for the other side here. Trying not to add too much glue so that you don't see it through the vellum. So I can just wiggle those in place, and then I can add some more glue onto the back of this piece so that I can add it onto the body. I am going to cut the body another 2 times a little bit later so that I can layer them on top of each other, but at this point I don't know whether I'm going to use this one or the lighter shade of one, so I don't want to do that just yet. So I can just wiggle those wings in place, and that's the good thing about using the liquid glue. So that's the darker shade of the glitter cardstock, and then this is the lightest shade. I can then assemble the wood cookie, so I'm just adding some liquid glue onto the back of the outside piece. Just lining that up with the bottom piece. And again, I can just wiggle that in place before the glue dries. And then I can add some more glue onto the back of this piece. And this did take me a little while to add all of the glue on. I don't need to add it in every single area, but just enough so that it's going to stick down nicely. And then I'm just figuring out here where I need to line it up. So it's kind of like 2 notches at the bottom, which is quite helpful to be able to see where to place it. And then some of the glue did ooze out a little bit, so I'm just using the tips of the tweezers here just to remove that glue. I'm then going to work on my sentiment, so I'm taking the sentiment from the Magnolia Ballerina stamp set, and I'm stamping the sentiment that says just a card to say hello. I think that's what it says. I'm going to stamp that in the stamp wheel onto some Classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock. So I'm using the stamp wheel here, and I'm just bringing in the top flip plate, popping that in place to lift up that stamp. And then I'm inking it up with obsidian pigment ink. So just making sure to ink that up really well. And then I can stamp that down onto the cardstock. Just pressing down quite gently there, and then I can lift off that top flip plate. I did set that aside to dry for a little while, and now I'm going to cut it out with the ornate nesting die set. So I'm taking the smaller of the dies and I'm going to place that over the top. I am going to create a tag from this shape, so I want to make sure that I've got enough space at the top to add the hole into. So I've run that through my die cutting machine, and then I'm going to take the whole piece from the labels and tags to die set. This is a little bit big than I actually need it to be, but that's okay. I think it still looks quite nice. So I'm just going to hold that in place, run that through my die cutting machine, and now I've created my tag. And that is the third way to add interest to die cuts, and that is to create your own kind of shapes and use them in different ways than they were intended to be. I could have created the tag from lots of different shapes of dies, but I do love those ornate nesting dies, and this small size I thought would work nicely for the sentiment. And it's a great way to get more use out of your dies as well, to change the shape of them or use them in slightly different ways. I'm adding some thread through the top of the tag. This is the Silky Lilac shade from the metallic thread set, and it's kind of got like a silvery sort of lilac-y tone to it. I think it's really quite pretty. I have doubled up on the thread so that it creates a little bit more impact on the tag. I do often go for more of like a thicker black twine, but I wanted something a little bit more delicate for this tag because it is quite small, and I really love this thread. I think it's really pretty. So I've now got my card base here. This is an A2 size white card base, so that's a finished size of 4¼ inches by 5½ inches, and I'm just arranging my elements here so that I can see where I want them to be placed before I stick anything down. I am going to have some of the leaves overhanging the card base. I know that not everyone loves to do that, and I would actually really love to hear your thoughts on it. I do like having elements overhanging my card base. I do often try to have my card base a little bit smaller than like a standard A2 size if I know that I'm going to overhang something, so that it will still fit in a standard sized envelope. But in this instance, because that wood cookie is quite large, I didn't really want to cut the card base down, so I am going to have to create a custom sized envelope for this card, but I do still think it looks quite nice having them overhang. I could just cut off the kind of tips of the leaves, but most of the time I think it depends on the design of the card. Sometimes I don't mind cutting pieces off, but sometimes I do prefer to sort of have them as is. So I would love to hear your thoughts on if you create standard size cards and don't really want anything overhanging the outside, or you're happy to create a kind of custom sized envelope if you want to have things overhanging. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. So I've added some instant dimension foam tape onto the back of the wood cookie, and then I can just pop that in place. And then I've got this other leaf here, so I'm just figuring out really where I want it to be placed. I'm going to add a little bit more instant dimension foam tape onto the back of the tag. And then I'm going to use that kind of like a placeholder to figure out where I want that other leaf cluster to be. So I can just add some liquid glue onto the back of that. And then just using the tag again just to figure out exactly where I want it to be. And I do end up moving it a little bit, but that's the great thing about using the liquid glue. So now I can remove the backings off of that foam tape, and then I can pop that down onto the card. And then now I've got the ladybugs, and I'm trying to figure out which colour looks best. And I do really like the dark one. I think it makes more sense, and it is a little bit more muted, so it does go with the kind of look of the card. But I did think it got a little bit lost, so I decided to use the brighter one in the end. So I have cut the body of the ladybug another 2 times from the black cardstock, and I'm just going to layer those on top of each other to add some dimension onto the ladybug. I didn't really want to add it with foam tape because I wanted it to be sort of stuck onto the wood slice so that it kind of looked like it was actually on it rather than kind of hovering above it. So just lining those up again with the liquid glue, and then I can add a little bit more onto the back before I pop that down onto the card. And I do think that that one stands out a little bit more. And then to finish off the card, I added a few clear droplets just around the outside edges of kind of like where the leaf clusters are. So that is the card finished for today, showing you 3 ways to add interest onto die cuts. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.